So the last step for this is going to be, I'm going to show you how to do a little bit of rendering. It's going to be simple, basic rendering. It's not going to be anything super intense. It's just going to be so we can have an extra layer of information for our section drawing. So it's not just line work. So we're going to be working strictly in our section right view for this right now. Make sure it's set to the correct area. And if you need to redo your clipping plane, do so. Otherwise, don't scroll in and out at all. You don't need to do anything with adjusting it. Just leave it the way it is. And so what we're going to do is we need to do actually some rendering tools. And so on this dialog up here, we're going to go all the way to almost the end and click rendering tools. And then from there, we need to create some sunlight for ourselves, so that way we have something to cast shadows, give ourselves a little bit of depth. So where we can do that is actually this little sun right here with some sunglasses on. We're going to click that. And it's going to open up this rhinoceros dialog box. You also have the option of doing your own light sources, but for now we're just going to use the sun, because it's already has predetermined directionality. So what we're going to do to turn on the sun is literally just click on. And we're going to choose, so here you can actually choose the location and the time of the day and the year. So depending on where your project is, you could actually be extremely realistic for a sun. You also have the option of choosing the exact location. So let's say if you wanted to do something in New York, it's going to choose New York, and it's going to already set up your latitude and your longitude. So that way the sun is actually hitting at the correct angle. And if you say here, I don't know if it locates where you are. That'd be crazy. I don't think it would know. Oh, Los Angeles, California. It knows where we are. That's kind of scary. So I'm just going to click here and let's do it in Los Angeles, California. That's fine. And I'm going to scroll back up. And instead of, well, let's actually, so we can see what kind of results we're creating for ourselves, let's go from shaded mode into rendered mode. And you'll see there's this yellow sun already casting on the model. So some things we can do here is change the time, and you'll see that the shadow changes as well. And once you go to nighttime, obviously the model gets dark, right? There's no sun. And so we can also change the time of the year. So we can change the month. And so what that does is, if you notice just above where I'm changing it, if you'll look at the sun position diagrams here, we have our north, south, east, west, and our 90° to -90. When I change that, you'll notice that those things change as well. And in the summer, the sun sets a lot higher, right, at an angle than in the winter. In the winter, it's almost flat. And in the summer, it's up at about 33 degrees. In December, it's at 6. So you can see when I change that, the shadows change as well, right? And it's the same time of day. That's what's something to take note about. So your shadows will become a lot longer in December versus in June. And so I think I'm just going to choose a time like, I'm actually going to do something based off of what looks good for this view. And so obviously that doesn't look good at all, right? The sun is already set around the model. So I think I'm going to keep it to the morning time because our model is facing east right now. And I'm going to choose, let's see here, I'm going to start in January and kind of move around here. And I don't want too much shadow. Okay, so that seems good to me. So I chose September 6th, 2000 at 7 a.m. Let me just change it to 7 a.m. here. Let's hope not. Now, one thing I'm going to do is turn on my Skylight to on. And so what that's going to do is it's going to help brighten the model, so that way, you see how dark it is in some areas here? When you render that, it's going to render it that dark. And so if we turn the Skylight on, it's actually going to help make those areas visible still. It'll shade them darker, but it won't shade them so dark that you can't see anything. And let's see here, you could turn a ground plane on, but don't think we need that. So I think we're just going to only deal with the sun right now.
What is that one? Is material?
Ground plane. So what a ground plane does is it creates an infinite ground plane on the ground for you. So that way when you render, it uses that ground plane as information. Essentially, it uses the ground plane as a plane for the sun to reflect off of.
And have a shadow?
It won't have a shadow. Actually, it will help the model cast a shadow, right? Right now, since we're doing a flat drawing, you're not going to see any shadows except for what is on this model. So we don't need to worry about the ground plane. If you're doing a perspective style drawing, that would be useful. So now that I've done that, I have my sun on, I have my Skylight on, I set my location to Los Angeles, and I chose the day of September 6, 2000, and which was 16 years ago almost, and 7 a.m. And so now that I've done all that, I'm going to hit the X and get out of it, and it's going to retain all that information. And so now I've sort of set up a very basic rendering setting. So now from there, we can go in and at the beginning here, we can hit render. It's this first bubble with a little shiny gloss on it. And it's going to take about 13 seconds, which is really quick. And it's produced a very rough version of the model there. And after the fact, you can go in and start to play with how much gamma correction there is. And I'll just do the presets to show you the difference. So that's 2.2 versus 1.8 versus 1.5 versus 1, which is what it was set at. You can also go here and tone it. So there's a black and white toning. And we should be able to adjust that from the slider down here. So you can see how you can sort of start to mess with your rendering. I'm going to leave it at 1 and 1 for now. There's other options here. So there's logarithmic. There's also these versions too. And I encourage you to go through all of them and play with all the settings. You can adjust the brightness of it and the light adaptation. And so what I would suggest is to go through each one of these on your own time and sort of see what is producing the best result for you. I'm going to just keep it at none for right now. And one thing I want you to note is this little icon right here that says Show Distance Channel. When you click this, it's going to change your rendering to show you from closest to furthest. And it's going to shade it from closest to furthest. What's furthest away is going to be darker, and what's closest is going to be lighter. That can be actually really useful as a secondary image to overlay, and it'll help add a secondary layer of shading to your drawing, or to your image, I should say. So in order to get back to where you were before, you just want to hit the Show RGB channel, and it'll take you back. You can also change it to your red, your green, and your blue. And so typically the one you want to be at is all three. Okay, and so this was just a really quick rendering. Let's notice that our image size was at 640 by 480, and it took us 12 seconds to render that. So let's actually adjust some settings here, and I'm going to create a new video for it. So we'll adjust some settings and do another rendering, and then take a break.